Nigeria turned 63 yesterday, and for most citizens, it has been the hope for a better future deferred again and again. For some, it is a lost cause, and for many born before the independence, their early post-independence optimism of a great and prosperous nation growing out of the ashes of colonialism has been dashed.
Now, in a blistering critique in December 2020 of Nigeria's governance and political economy, Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese Matthew Hassan Kukah wailed in a Christmas message titled A Nation in Search of Vindication, for those who read it back then. Now, statistically speaking, Nigeria has consistently ranked low in the World Governance Index in areas such as government effectiveness, political stability, and the presence of violence and terrorism. The rule of law also and control of corruption, we've continued to be rated very poorly. Nigeria is also perceived in the 2022 Transparency International Corruption Perception Index as a highly corrupt country. Now let's bring in Chief Dele Momodu, who's a publisher and politician. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us, Chief Momodu.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us. Before we get into Nigeria conversations proper, I want to quickly get your thoughts on something that is expected by a couple of people today. The Chicago State University ruling on President Bola Tinubu's information and details from Chicago State. Let's quickly get your thoughts on what that might do to our polity. Depends on what exactly is revealed today and what your expectations are.
Well, I'm not clairvoyant, so I have no idea whatsoever what will be revealed. So we're all waiting with bated breath. But what I know is that we shouldn't have gone this far if everything was well at home. We have a judiciary, we have the Special Fraud Unit, we have the FCC, we have National Assembly, we have different arms of government that ordinarily to process whosoever is contesting in the country, whosoever is being appointed as a minister. But unfortunately, everything is now rubber stamped. So, and when people cannot get justice at home, they seek validation abroad. And that is what my principal, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, has done. He's been compelled, he was left with no choice. That, okay, if the people at home are not serious about the future of their children, are not serious about their country and our place in the community of nations, then we have to go elsewhere and seek justice. And this is exactly what he has done. It will deepen our democracy. What we expect out of it is that hopefully there will be incontrovertible evidence that there have been a lot of infractions which have been overlooked and studiously ignored at home. And now we can then bring it back to the Supreme Court and hope that the Supreme Court justices will be manly enough, will be courageous enough, in case it favors Atiku. In case I don't want to prejudge them, I'm not a judge. But that is the only reason why Atiku has decided to go to America, to go and dig out the roots of the issue. It may be a landmark moment for Nigeria. Nigeria deserves to wake up from its deep slumber. We've been sleeping a lot, and the world is laughing at us everywhere we go. People believe that we're the most corrupt nation on earth, whereas we're the country of the greatest human beings on earth. That's my belief. I've been all over the world on 5 continents, and everywhere I've been, I've seen Nigerians working very hard, doing things. Even in the cabinet of the President of the United States, you find Nigerians everywhere, and they are doing great things. So I come back home, and it is because we're not serious, we don't love our country enough, we don't love our nation. We all talk about, he's a Yoruba man, he's a Fulani man, he's an Igbo man. Whereas we should be thinking big at this time. Nigeria did not create Nigeria to be a useless monster. We're so big, and there must be a reason why Nigeria made us big. Though we all disagree all the time and say we want to go our separate ways, I can tell you there is strength in our being big. We're among the biggest nations on earth. So
All right.
why are we wasting that opportunity that God has given to us?
And it is very true that you've mentioned that we're a very big nation. We've heard slogans like the unity in our diversity, the strength in our diversity being talked about for years. Even though I'll come to the president's speech yesterday to get your reactions to that, but I think that this is a good way to start the conversation this morning. Let's talk about the political landscape of Nigeria at 63. I believe that you've also been here. You were here before. I mean, the independence, or you can talk to us about what the earlier years looked like in comparison to what we have today. A stanza in the national anthem says that the labors of our heroes past shall never be in vain. But a number of those in this generation would argue that where we are is a far cry from where we ought to be. So I'd like you to maybe walk us down memory lane as to some of the mistakes that we may have made and what we may need to do to be able to correct the errors in our political landscape in Nigeria at 63.
Well, maybe you're not aware, I was actually born in the year 1960, May 16th to be precise. So you can call me a child of independence. I grew up in a Nigeria where in the First Republic, we had great men and women lead our country. These were fantastic scholars. They went to good schools. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Sir Tafawa Balewa, Sir Ahmadu Bello. These were first-class politicians. But unfortunately, after we had the first military coup, then we had coups after coups, we went through a civil war that wasted so many lives of our own people. And here we are today. From those first-class brains at the beginning, Nigeria is now saddled with what Franz Fanon called the wretched of the earth. A lot of our politicians today are in power just because of one thing: access to unlimited cash. So those days are gone when we had ideologues who had their ideology. You could know whether a man was a capitalist, whether he was a social democrat, whether he was a welfareist, he was a socialist. So these days, we're totally confused about the direction our politicians are going. So we grew up also in a country where education, in fact, in those days, for anyone to go and study abroad, it's either you were on scholarship or you couldn't get a place back home and you just wanted to go and, hustle abroad. All the children of big men that I knew today schooled in Nigeria, and the quality of education was good. In fact, foreigners used to come to Nigeria to attend schools. Even in Ife, where I grew up, which people call a rural setting, we had people who came from all over the world to study. But today, that is not the case. So, and the issue of corruption, people frowned at corruption at that time. Yes, of course, there could be a few corrupt cases there and there, but it was not as pandemic as what we have today. And that is why every right-thinking Nigerian should take what Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is doing very seriously. That look, yes, we've all made our mistakes in the past, but there must be a method to our madness. There must be a limit to our rascality. Right now, people are not afraid of anything. If you go to court now, you don't know what to expect. The same court that said A last year, if you go to the same court today with the same justices, suddenly things will change. So these are very germane issues that we need to attend to, and we're hoping that as we celebrate 63 years, it's a long period in the life of a nation. At 63, we should have matured, we should have made all our mistakes, and by now we should be able to correct those mistakes.
Yeah, well, it really depends also on if we're on the path to correcting those mistakes, because we're talking about a lot of mistakes here that have been made. But for some people, luckily, we just finished the elections. A new government is in office. The government is taking steps that seemingly would put Nigeria on the right path. So I'm going to ask, of course, if you also believe same that the current administration has come in. It's putting Nigeria on the right path, and Nigeria, of course, in the next 4 years, maybe in the next 8 years, would be able to celebrate independence in a totally different, fashion. And of course, the country would be a lot happier at that time. Do you think that President Tinubu really understands what's at stake and is putting the right things in place for a better country in the next couple of years?
Well, no matter what I say, some people will consider it subjective, but I'll try to be as objective as possible. The current government of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was expected to be a very experienced government for a man who had led Lagos. In fact, he has virtually controlled Lagos in the last 24 years, endlessly, and is still in control in Lagos. And Lagos is supposed to be one of the biggest, if it was a country, to be one of the most important countries in Africa. When you look at the capacity, the financial capacity of Lagos, we were told they were ready and they will hit the ground running. But unfortunately, we can't see the ground and we can't see the runners. What we see is a total hulabaloo, a total confusion. We're in a state of confusion. A new government ought to give hope to the people from day one. But what we saw was a wishy-washy decision to remove the subsidy instantly without it being well thought out, without looking at the repercussions and how to help the situation. I think that's where the problem started from. On May
We seem to have lost the connection there with. Okay, all right. Kindly go ahead, Chief Momodu.
What did you say, please? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the first news was bad news. That news could have been looked at more critically, consider the repercussions of it, and then you can come out with it. We would have expected it, for example, if possible, to be phased out, because it's like your landlord coming to say you were paying 2,000 naira a month, and suddenly you have to pay 10,000 naira a month when your salary has not increased. And on top of it, whether you like it or not, you must pay in advance. So now they are talking about palliative. How many people can enjoy the palliative? And how do we determine those who will enjoy the palliative? I watched the speech yesterday by Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and I was shocked when I saw we add 25,000 naira to low income earners. How do you determine what data, in a country where we know that politicians are capable of any form of abracadabra?
Yes. So all
I
these things.
don't see.
Apologies, Chief, but so do all these things. Because I don't want us to take too much time analyzing them individually. But from what you've seen, does it from your analysis? Are you basically seeing that Nigeria is not going anywhere? We're doing the same dance again for the next 4 years?
My analysis is very simple. Apart from the team that I have seen, a serious government would have brought in a fresh team of technocrats and politicians, not the same recycled people who collapsed the nation in the first instance. A serious government would not be thinking about its survival alone. What I see is a survivalist government, a government that wants to grab at anything and everything just to remain in power. We must consider our country. This country has suffered a lot in the past. And I expected that, hey, we should have sympathetic undertakers, if I can use that phrase. But what I see are unsympathetic politicians. We have them at the executive level, we have them at the legislative level, and we're hoping that the judiciary will be different. So for me, it's unfortunate that I cannot see that ray of hope yet. No.
I mean, that's a very unfortunate situation to not be able to see a ray of hope. And I will take it that also the speech did not give you any ray of hope. You know, sometimes situations might be bad, but the speech might in some way be able to inspire hope. So I want to believe as well that the speech given by the president did not inspire any ray of hope in you or majority of people. But let's talk about the cabinet, you know, the current cabinet that we're running. A number of criticism that has arisen from the president's time in office would be that the speech yesterday, the emphasis was basically telling us about how the government is making plans for Nigerians, plans to better the quality of life of Nigerians, and how we need to endure today to be able to have a better tomorrow. But this is not the first time we're hearing this same song. It's been sung year after year, administration after administration. As far back as even 1986, we heard that same story of endure today for a better tomorrow. Now, what exactly would need to be done? Some of the things that the president has been criticized about would be his very bogus cabinet, it would seem. They're talking about cutting the cost of governance and how the current administration is not even paying attention to that. So do you think that this is a conversation that might be explored, that needs to be explored now? Do you see that it will be explored, seeing as Nigerians are talking about it? And I mean, I know that your principal is currently challenging the position of the president. I don't know if, I mean, we don't know how this is going to turn out, but do you think that that's a conversation that your principal would have been open to, cutting down the cost of governance?
Definitely. There is no right-thinking government that we run an over-bloated government at this time. Nigeria is in dire straits. And it's unfortunate that our politicians have no pity, no mercy on their country. This is a time where we need patriotic men and women to stand up for our country. I don't have to tell a government before they realize that you cannot practice capitalism without capital. What I see are politicians who came to power and they don't care whether the masses are suffering and dying. They are just interested in the pecuniary gains of being in power. That's so unfortunate. If they came from the one and they say, oh, we believe we are privileged to be here, and this is our contribution. All the vehicles we use to buy, whatever we have at home, can bring it. People will say, oh, it's not practical. I am telling you, as a businessman, I know it's very practical. And I like to give practical examples. There were times when the economy was very bad in Nigeria. If I was flying first class, I would downgrade myself to economy or at the very best premium. That's what our politicians need to do. But what I see in Abuja now, if you go to Abuja now, it's a jamboree going on. I can't see any sign of hard times, whereas every home in Nigeria is crying. Only the politicians are not crying. So, an Alhaji Atiku Abubakar government would have done something about this. You cannot have this level of discomfort, and yet you are living as if all is well. We are going abroad every day to go and borrow money. And do you think those who are giving us the money cannot see what we do with the money? So we can't continue with this prodigal son approach to government just because you must remain. And then I'm complaining all the time about the team that has been assembled. This team, oh my God, how can you bring back all those? Many of them still have cases in EFCC today. They are virtually protected from being scrutinized. All this issue of going to America to seek information. This information, I'm sure, is available right here. But nobody, the EFCC, for example, says for them to begin investigation of any public officer, they will receive a petition and blah, 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 and then but there have been petitions upon petitions in Nigeria against some of these people in power today, and nobody did anything about it. So they can afford to ignore the EFCC, they can afford to ignore judiciary. I mean, there is no country that lives so recklessly and ultimately will not pay the price for it. I think we're getting very close to that final final judgment day, when we will stop doing things like I am untouchable. A country of untouchables is a risk to itself
But sir,
and to the future generations.
how do you respond to those who would say that what you're saying, whilst it makes sense, it feels like, again, it's the same song that has been sung from administration to administration. Your principal has been in office, and there are people who say that the APC and PDP are cut from the same cloth and they're not any different. So what would be your response to people who have that argument?
My response would be that they should check the records. Atiku left power in 2007. He's a businessman, he's a consummate businessman. One of the things I admire in him is that this is a man who has invested everything in this country, in Nigeria. His businesses are thriving. Most politicians live permanently on government. Atiku is not one of those. Atiku does not control any state. There's no state where Atiku can call a governor and say, yeah, go and bring me money. There's none. Atiku is a businessman, employing people, one of the biggest employers of labor in Nigeria. And you must respect him for that. And he believes in the rule of law. When he declared that he didn't win, he did not cause any riot, he went to court. Now he's in America, still pursuing the rule of law. For me, that is a shining example of leadership. Last week he told me, he said, Dele, this is not about me, it's about our country. And that's what I like to hear from a leader. A leader who is not fighting for himself because he wants to be president. He just believes that, look, let's settle these things, this matter once and for all. So anybody who talks about, oh, they are all the same, yeah, it's very easy to categorize and generalize, but it is obvious that Atiku is in a class of his own. In fact, a lot of people who used to abuse him weeks ago, now they are all calling me to say, I think you are right after all. This man is very focused. This man is very, very serious, very patriotic about Nigeria, and he has demonstrated it, over time. I saw it firsthand in 1993 when he stepped down for Chief Motu Abiola in Jos, and the Jos primary. He went away quietly. He didn't throw tantrums. He didn't fight anybody. That is the man. Even the last PDP presidential primary, when there were problems, he approached Wike and others. They invited him. He met with them in London. So he's a man of peace. And that is what we need right now, not this gra-gra that we see all over the places.
Yeah, well, we'll see how things turn out. I mean, that could also be, an argument, for the average Nigerian politician that really just wants, power. But I want to, ask, once again about President Tinubu. You've been in the political landscape for a long time. Some of the questions that were raised about his identity, about his school certificates, about his lack of anybody who went to school with him, lack of, a lot of things, that seem to be very shady about his background. Are those things that you've always questioned, even before he decided to run for president? When he was governor, when he remained, like you said, in control of Lagos for a long time. Did you, in your own circles, also raise these questions as to who this person is?
I can tell you confidently that these issues have been there. Many times people have raised the jig, and if I went to court, even Festus Keyamo went to court and all that. But I blame the Ashwaju and his cronies. Maybe this thing would not have gotten this bad if he came out. There's nothing wrong. If you have adopted parents, there's nothing wrong with it. But own up to it. Everybody knew that Chifenku Abiola was my adopted father. But everybody still knew that Mr. Jacob Momodu and Mrs. Gladys Momodu gave birth to me. There's nothing wrong with that. If you didn't go to school, Nigeria allows just ordinary school certificates, WAEC, what we call WAEC in our own time. Okay? That's all you need. But if you say, Professor Keyamo came on television and said, because Ashwaju is a genius, he didn't go to primary school, he didn't go to secondary school, those were the mistakes. Because of the garrulosity of the people around him, when some of us were close to him, maybe we would have been able to go inside the room and say, oh God, don't let's take this route, let's do it this way. But the guys felt, no, nobody can challenge us and we can say any nonsense and people will take it, Nigerians will take it. This is the repercussion. There is nothing wrong if you don't have a university certificate. There is nothing wrong with it. Come out and say, I have it, I don't have it. Present it. But when your own lawyer start blocking America from releasing your results, and you are supposed to be a first-class brain, people will ask questions. I'm sure even those judges are baffled that what could this thing contain that would make the man to be spending so much money on lawyers? I still saw one of his lawyers yesterday attacking those who are questioning Asiwaju. And I'm like, can these people be sober for once? So it is their mistake. They should not blame Nigerians for it. I will not judge anybody unfairly. I'm not an Asiwaju. He's a man that we all love and respect, but the way they've mishandled this case, they should own up to it that they mishandled that case. They should have just come out to tell Nigerians are so forgiving, forget it.
Well, I mean,
just come on
spirit of Nigerians
and say,
really,
yes,
hasn't
my
really
name
helped.
is this, my name is that, and this is what I have. In my younger days, I had issues. I'm not a privileged child. I say that all the time. Everybody likes to listen to great stories. I have not seen that, but what I see are people around him still arrogating to them the power and the ability to do and undo. It's so unfortunate.
Yeah, but will you call if these things are revealed to contain information that continues to, shows that the certificate was actually forged, maybe other things were forged about his personality and about his foundation, about his name, about his some of, like you mentioned, his parents and all of that. Would you say that that's enough reason, in your opinion, for the Supreme Court to maybe rule against the current president? And would that be one of the things that you would call for?
Personally, I think this case, if the Supreme Court does not settle it, and I go beyond the Supreme Court, there are many avenues for you to ask that to step down, especially in the face of grave offense. So I don't want to preempt it, but I know that if the Supreme Court sees overwhelming evidence and they ignore it, then people will seek other options. There are other options that people can do, but I don't want to preempt it. You see, anywhere else, anyway, if such a thing happens, the leader will voluntarily resign. And he'll be applauded for it. History will judge that at least once upon a time we had a man who aspired to be the president and whether legally or illegally got it. So that should be enough comfort for anybody. But if they continue to dig deeper and deeper and refuse to respect the laws of Nigeria, but we have a law. It's not that those laws are not being obeyed. Right. And like I said, nobody expects you to be a saint. It's just that you refuse to own up to not being a saint. That is what has led us to this problem. There is no issue whatsoever. Let's wait till we see what is coming from Chicago. I think those things are already in Nigeria. They came from Nigeria to Chicago. Now from Chicago, we're bringing them back to Nigeria, just like our oil, that we take our crude oil abroad to refine and we bring it back at huge cost. I see clarity in what is going on, and we pray that Nigeria will be better for it. It's all about Nigeria, it's not personal. I mean, like you said, they were colleagues, they were all friends. I don't think Atiku has any enemy anywhere. But it's just that this issue is so critical to the survival of Nigeria. And we must all applaud those who have the courage to stand up and say, hey, we can't go on like this.
Right.
Thank you.
Chief Momodu, on the final note, we'd like to find out what your thoughts are on the communication system of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. There has been, maybe in some measure, some will call it a miscommunication, especially if we remember the case of the lifting of the Dubai ban, the UAE ban, visa ban. So how would you assess so far the communication, of course, being represented by Ajuri Ngelale, and you are a communications expert yourself. So, how would you rate it, and what can be done differently and maybe even better?
No, I don't want to castigate the presidential spokesman. He's doing his best. You can't do more than his best. So he's doing his best. But what I need to tell Nigerians is that as someone who has been in the media and public relations space in the last 3 to 4 decades, I can tell you that a lot of people don't realize that there is a difference between being a media person and being a public relations person. A few people can cross those lines. I believe I've managed to cross those lines. But it's not everybody that understands that PR is much more deeper. Do you understand? And that is why the NIPR people had to come out to issue a statement that no, you cannot continue like this because there were too many gaps. Like I said, he's trying his best to develop, but then they have people in their team who could have helped them. Like my former boss, Bayo Nanuga, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know why they chose to ignore him. I think he was doing better. And
was he really doing better?
They will have to
if you remember the incidents that happened in the build-up to the elections, was Bayo Onanuga really doing better? He was accused of also promoting some level of very
my boss was a bit overzealous.
Okay.
We also had my other boss, Mr. Dele Momodu, who was called for my arrest, and I couldn't believe it. I said, "You, of all people, I know what we discussed between us and all that, and then you go on television and say they should arrest me for speaking the truth." I've never abused Ashwaju anywhere, never. Even when they were talking about all these Chicago, all these drug cases, I kept my mouth like this. You know, because sometimes you give your friends that privilege of being your friend. And that is why, but the stage we are right now, nobody can defend it. You know, because they mismanaged it, not because we convicted them. They were the ones who convicted themselves by trying to prevent justice, by going to Chicago. The lawyers, I don't know how the lawyers managed to convince them that they can do the same rascality they do in Nigeria, that they can do it abroad. I don't know how, you know. But unfortunately, those of us who could talk to him were not there with him. So we're watching and we're like, hey, can this continue and for how long will it continue? But like I said, it will be resolved sooner than later.
Well,
if he is free of any offense, we'll give him a standing ovation. Right. But if they say no, the infractions are too much to ignore, then we watch how the justices will determine the case.
It is said that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. I guess very soon we'll find out how clean exactly the hands of our president is in terms of the records. And we, of course, would love to have you back to expand further on this conversation. Thank you very much, Chief Momodu, for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central.
Thank you so much for inviting me. All right.
And to our audience watching, if you'd like to react, at News Central TV on all social media platforms, that we do this every day, DSTV 422 from 7 to 9 a.m. Very interesting conversation we've had there, and I'm sure that there are other Nigerians who have reactions as to how exactly Nigeria at 63 has presented to them and what exactly they want to see better. There's been an air of doom to an extent. There's not been a lot of celebration, but I'm sure that we're hoping. I think what we're holding on to is a hope that things will get better. Hope that the pregnant woman has, that after 9 months you birth your child and you would see that joy that you've been carrying. We're hoping, but it's not looking very good. At the time when the current administration came into office, the dollar was already even ridiculously high to the tune of about 700 naira. Now it's roughly like 1,000. So it's not really the best scenario. It's not the best situation. But all we have is hope. We have to hold on to hope.
Unfortunately, hope doesn't, fix the country. Doesn't pay bills. And two things that I would say is, and I think I've said this repeatedly here, that truth is never hidden. I mean, you could mask it. You can, ask your media and whoever else, to create different stories and propaganda. But everybody knows truth, and regardless of how hard you try to hide it, it will never go away. And I'm saying that with regards the events, that have played out for 2023. I don't want to be specific in Nigeria. Everybody knows, what truth is. And then, the second thing is a lot of people have basically checked out mentally and emotionally from the Nigerian project. They do not see that anything is different. They do not see that anything will change in the next long while. And so, celebrate independence, celebrate any other national holiday, and there's just not that energy anymore with a lot of Nigerians. It will
And,
take a lot
and it's
to
not as
fix
if
it.
they're even very excited about, whilst, we have several options. We have the APC, we have the PDP, and we have the Labour Party. Many would argue that they're all cut from the same cloth. It's
Very
not
true.
very
Yeah,
exciting.
And I just to quickly mention before we go to sports in a bit, and I asked this question yesterday to one of our guests: does the current Nigerian leadership represent what Nigeria has done to itself in the last 60 years?